How do you choose which headphones to buy? Do you have different headphones for different sound? Do you EQ all of them to sound the same? Do you try to find headphones that are as neutral or transparent as possible? Whatever the motivation is that you apply to each headphone that you purchase, you'll probably want to know about this pair. These are the HEDD D1 headphones, and they're a bit different. They're different from the other HEDD headphones because they use a dynamic driver instead of the traditional AMT drivers used by HEDD in their other models. But then they're different from other dynamic driver headphones because they use a completely unique material to make up that dynamic driver. And then they're different from almost every other headphone on the market at all because they're so incredibly neutral and honest. But they do face some pretty tough competition, so let's take a closer look. The HEDD D1 is a brand new headphone that's just been released by HEDD. And I want to thank them for trusting me with this review of the D1s. But having said that, it's important for you to know that HEDD have no influence over this review other than telling me the specifications, features and pricing of the D1s. If you're not familiar with HEDD, or HEDD Audio as they might be known, they're a pro audio brand originally that's branched a little bit into the audiophile and consumer audio world, but not by much. And what I mean by that is that they produce headphones for the audiophile market, but they don't colour them deliberately. They stick true to their pro audio roots by producing very neutrally tuned headphones that are very honest and very transparent. In other words, much like what the pros want. And I would say from what I've heard, that the D1s stay very, very true to what I just said. In fact, they might be just as transparent and neutral as the flagship Headphone 2 from HEDD Audio, if not even more so. Of course, at 699 euros or $799 US, the HEDD D1 is not quite as technically capable as the Headphone 2, but I'd say its tuning and its sense of neutrality and honesty is just as good, if not even better than the Headphone 2. And as exceptional as I think the tuning of the D1 is, its design might be even better. To me, these look and feel like a premium headphone, with lines and a design that's sleek but understated. The use of fabric on the headband and the pads mean that these are comfortable for long sessions, and that's going to be true even in warmer climates. And then on the bottom of each ear cup, they use 3.5mm sockets, meaning that you can use the included 6.3mm terminated cable, or you can get your own upgraded aftermarket cables if you want to. And on that note, if you do want upgraded cables for whatever headphone you're using, either because you want a different plug at the amplifier end, or if you want to have a single cable that connects to your headphone amplifier, and then just short split pieces like this one that connect to your headphones and stay there, then Deconi Audio have the answer for you. Deconi Audio have kindly sponsored this video, and in doing so, they're allowing me to offer you 10% off any and all products on their website. That means you can get 10% off their great ensemble cable range that I just showed you, or off their headphone earpads, earphone ear tips, the comfort accessories, or their headphone carry cases. Basically whatever they sell on their website, you can get 10% off. To get that discount, just go to deconiaudio.com, put whatever you want into your shopping cart, and then before you check out, enter the code PassionForSound10 to get 10% off all of it. And in case you forget the details here, I've put all the links in the description down below as usual. And so if you do get a pair of HEDD D1s and you're not happy to have just a single 6.3mm cable, which is a very pro thing to have, then you might choose to get yourself a set of the Deconi cables for them. But if we move on from the cable discussion, let's talk now about the internal design of the D1, because it looks to be just as exceptional, or maybe more exceptional, than the outer design of the D1s. These use a dynamic driver within each ear cup, and that dynamic driver has an impedance of 32 ohms and a sensitivity of 100 decibels per milliwatt. That's all pretty normal, and it means that the D1s are pretty easy to drive from basically any source, from a portable dongle all the way through to a desktop headphone amp. What's different here though is not the specs, but the materials making the driver itself. It's made in collaboration with a brand called Composite Sound, and as their name would suggest, Composite Sound specialise in the use of fancy materials. In this case, what Composite Sound have created is the world's first thin ply carbon diaphragm. That's what's being used in the D1. Basically what this amounts to is taking exceedingly thin layers of carbon, aligning them and bonding them together to make an extremely lightweight but rigid diaphragm for the dynamic drivers. And by being so exceedingly light and very rigid, they should result in a sound that is excellent, highly responsive, highly transparent, highly detailed. That's the theory. Whether or not all of that translates to great sound quality though, is a whole nother matter, so let's dive in. And the first thing to say is that the tonal balance of the D1s, as I've pretty much already said, is exceptional. And what I mean by that in the specific context of the D1s is that they produce no sense of coloration or enhancement of any individual frequency. These sound like a perfectly neutral studio monitor, probably more than any other headphone I've ever heard, except maybe the Headphone 2. And even then it's a maybe. And so in that sense, the D1s offer an incredible source of insight into the tonal qualities of either a track that you might be mixing or editing or monitoring, or into the source chain that you're plugging them into. Every sound is available, every frequency is available for you to choose what to focus on and listen to without anything being pushed forward or pulled back in the mix. There's no masking of details by having excess bass, and there's no fatigue caused by excess brightness. However, the D1s also don't enhance the music with tasteful coloration, so you need to work out what it is that you're looking for, because sometimes a little bit of coloration can actually make things more fun. Of course, for users of EQ, the D1s could represent a fantastic blank canvas on which to sculpt your own personal coloration choices. But it's also important to consider headphones beyond just their tonality. Tonality is just one part of the overall performance of a headphone. And in addition to their immaculately balanced tonality, the D1s also offer incredible clarity and image placement and focus for their price. Each sound is beautifully focused and separated within the soundstage, which is not particularly deep but does have good width. I wouldn't say that the D1s are a wall of sound, a completely flat soundstage, but they're also not going to compete with absolute flagship models like a Focal Utopia or an Audeze LCD5. If we swing back a little bit towards tonality and think about the performance of the drivers at different frequencies, the quality of the bass from the D1s is excellent. They extend deep into the bass, and they have a lovely sense of punch and feel down low, despite there being no emphasis in that bass. So the bass doesn't lose its sense of presence or weight, it's just extremely well balanced with everything else. Thinking about these as just an enjoyment headphone, as opposed to an analysing or mixing or monitoring headphone, the tuning and the clarity of the D1s I found to be fantastic for classical genres and acoustic genres, basically anything where you want the solo instruments, the acoustic instruments, or the vocals to really be able to hold their own. If you enjoy weightier genres, where the rhythm and the drive of the music is a bit more important and a bit more of a focus, you may find that there are better headphones to choose from. It's not that the D1s lack bass, or that they lack bass feel and impact, but I think that some genres are actually better when the bass is a bit enhanced. Whether that's true for you is going to be up to you though. And to help clarify all of that, let's compare the D1s to a few other options around the same price. If we're talking in US dollars, the Meze 109 Pro is about the same price, if not exactly the same price, as the HEDD D1. And both of these headphones have the honour of being fully serviceable headphones, meaning that if something does happen to go wrong with either brand, you can replace any of the parts that happen to break. They can be repaired, not just replaced. Although unlike Meze Audio's 1 to 2 year warranty, depending on where in the world you are, the HEDD D1 comes with a 5-year warranty, which is pretty impressive. Now, of course, there will be terms and conditions to that warranty, so check the HEDD website if you want to know the fine details there, because I'm guessing they're not going to be covering things like plugging these into a speaker amp and forgetting to turn the volume down, so do check the fine details on the website before starting to think about warranty claims. But getting back to the comparison with the 109s, this is a great example of two very differently tuned headphones that are both excellent. Where the 109s emphasise the bass and the treble to create what I would consider a tastefully V-shaped sound, the comparison then with the D1 highlights just how incredibly well balanced the D1 is. The 109s punch more in the bass, and they sparkle more in the treble, sometimes a bit too much in the treble for some people. And as a result, the vocals from the 109s sometimes lack the sense of clarity and presence that they get from the D1. It's not to say the 109s are bad necessarily, they're just different. Vocals from the 109s come across a little bit thicker and a little bit smoother, whereas on the D1s you'll tend to hear a bit more detail and texture in the vocals because it's not being overshadowed by increased bass and increased treble. However, that's not to say that the D1s are better, because you might find the 109s more enjoyable because of their enhanced bass and treble. It's all going to come down to your tastes and your music preferences. Tonally, I find that the 109s can sometimes sound just a bit metallic or artificial in the upper treble, and that's due to the upper treble emphasis. And that's something that I never once heard from the D1s in all of my time with them. They are consistently very natural and lifelike in their tonal balance. Speaking about some of the other technicalities of sound, the 109s deliver a narrower soundstage than the D1s, but at the same time they have a little bit more sense of depth in the soundstage than the D1s. And so in contrast, the D1s stretch a little bit wider in the soundstage, not quite as deep, but I do think that the D1s maybe separate sounds within that space just a little bit better than what the 109s do. And so basically both of these are great headphones. For toe tapping fun, the 109s will probably be the better choice for many people. For tonal accuracy and insight, specifically if you're mixing or monitoring audio, or if you just want the absolute uncoloured truth, I think the D1s are amazing. But then another obvious contender that's also brand new is the HiFiMan HE600. Putting these two headphones against one another means putting one of the best planar magnetic headphone manufacturers in the world up against this fantastic new dynamic driver in the HEDD D1. And the results are really interesting. The HE600s are a bit of a departure from the tuning that we've been seeing recently from HiFiMan, and as a result, they're actually quite a close match for the tonality of the D1. They're more balanced and less treble emphasized than some of the other HiFiMan models. That makes them a close fit to the D1, but they're not quite the same. The HE600 delivers a little bit more bass weight, and I'm not sure if they've actually got more bass in terms of some emphasis there, or if it's just the way the drivers are delivering the sound that it has more presence. And that's because I tend to do all of my note taking before I take any measurements, and for this video I can't share the measurements through Squiglink like I normally do, because at the time that I'm recording this, the D1s haven't been released and I can't make those measurements public just yet. I will get them up there once the D1 is officially launched, and let me know in the comments if it is post-launch and I haven't put them on Squiglink, let me know and it'll be a reminder for me to do so. And so based entirely on what I'm hearing, the D1 and the HE600 have very similar tunings. Not identical, but similar. But I do still think that the D1 has the edge in overall tonal balance. The HE600s are just a little bit splashier in the treble, and as a result, sounds like cymbals are not quite as natural on the HE600 as they are from the D1. And that's really a standout from the D1s for me. Everything sounds natural. Nothing has any kind of tonal coloration as you listen to it through the D1. I also found that mid-range sounds like vocals don't have quite the same degree of clarity from the HE600s that they do from the D1. But on the other hand, the sense of bass presence and weight that I mentioned before is stronger on the HE600s, and I do find I prefer that, especially for genres that need that little bit more drive and presence in the bass. If we then put aside the tonal differences for a moment and just think about the technical performance of both headphones, I do feel like the D1s have an edge in their sense of clarity, control, and refinement once again. These are an incredibly composed headphone at every single frequency. The HE600s do sound excellent, and they produce a slightly more open and spacious sound than the D1s, so they're definitely still an excellent headphone, and if you're interested in them, make sure you subscribe because the full review of those is coming soon. But for now, the D1s have proved to me that they're both an excellent headphone from a listening enjoyment point of view, if you enjoy a very balanced and neutral tonality, but they're also going to be an amazing tool for anybody that needs insight, neutrality, and honesty from a pair of headphones for mixing, monitoring, etc. To put it succinctly, don't buy these for toe tapping fun. They're not the headphone for that. But do buy them if you're after a highly insightful and very composed sound with incredible tonal balance. That's where the D1s absolutely excel. And so as always, I'll try to find some links to put in the description down below for you. And if you need a fantastic amplifier to connect to a pair of headphones like the D1s, I've pinned a video here at the end for you to watch next. It's a fantastic choice. But until next time, peace, love, and music, and I'll see you soon.